actually with Natalia, and we're going to air this on Yachting International Radio. And I am here with a special guest all the way in London. Somi, how are you?
I'm good, Natalia. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Great, thanks. I'm loving our colors. We're all about brightness and being
That's
positive.
right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's easier for you being in France. I guess you probably have a little bit more sun, but there's not much sun here, so I'm trying to bring the sun inside.
And you're such a bright person yourself in all the ways
Thank you.
of the word. So we met a few weeks ago, initially at the turn of the decade. How exciting!
Yeah.
And
Yes, exactly.
yeah, and so we had a little bit of a chat behind the scenes, and I was very much inspired to have you on because you're such an amazing person, multi-award
Oh,
winning filmmaker, author, tech philosopher, entrepreneur, and also a LinkedIn top voice. Oh my goodness.
well, I didn't realize I was all of that stuff.
So perhaps I just want to ask you because I've never heard of this term before. LinkedIn top voice. What does that mean?
Every year, LinkedIn chooses 25 of the top content creators. And in the UK, that I have been chosen 2 years in a row. So as one of the top 25. And you know what? This year, my name was above Richard Branson's daughter, and I was like, "Oh,
Wow.
hello."
Yeah.
I don't know how much content she creates, but it does. Yeah, no, it's just a way of LinkedIn recognizing top content creators. They do it in America too, so I'm not sure they probably do it in France as well. So it just depends on how much content creation goes on in that area. So I know that in America they have it because it's a bigger community on LinkedIn. They probably have it, I think, in a few different areas. So like a few different states. But there's one for the UK, and it's just a way for them to recognize top content creators.
Well done. I'm so excited to have you. So you're like following in the footsteps of our world famous Gary Vaynerchuk, maybe.
Well, like I guess um, I have a similar ethos to Gary in some ways, and I have a lot of respect for him. But we do have different ways of doing things, and it's a very different. Um, I'm not trying to be a social media guru, so it's different, and uh, I see myself more as a thinker, philosopher. I just look at the deeper questions of how technology is changing our lives and how it impacts within a business environment, how it impacts the business landscape and the marketing landscape, and as well as HR. So basically, consumer behavior. I look at consumer behavior and also the future of work. So I just finished a book on the future of work as well. So it's two areas of future of work and marketing.
Fantastic. And so you've also worked very closely with luxury brands around the
Yes.
world, and specifically in no, it's actually coming up with the content and
Yeah.
making videos and just guiding them in terms of how to market themselves to the new generation of buyers, being the millennials sort of who are moving out and the next episode of the new buyers. So tell
Yeah.
me a bit more about what that is involved.
Yeah, well, our biggest client at the moment is Steinway Pianos, which is a brand that I really enjoy working with. They're the best pianos in the world. And, what I like about Steinway, at least the UK team that we work with very closely, specifically their MD, Craig Terry, he really understands how the world has changed. I've actually featured him in my documentary. And as opposed to a lot of luxury brands that I have in the past talked to and advised and worked with, you know, a lot of them think that because they've been here for a very long time that they're going to continue to be here. And sometimes they say that, oh, we've uh, survived World War, so we've been around for 100 years, we are going to be around for another 100 years. And it's very difficult for them to maybe consider the possibility that that may not be the case. Sometimes I tell them that the impact of the digital revolution is actually even bigger potentially than World War, and they find that somewhat arrogant and almost not plausible, and I think the luxury industry is in trouble in many ways, because one is because of its environmental impact, especially big brands like Louis Vuitton and uh, all those Gucci's and things like that. They are. Um, I think there's going to come a point where young people especially, are going to question the environmental impact of the brands, and already people are talking about it. Young people are talking about it. They're becoming a lot more aware of it. And the other thing is that our culture is changing, so the concept of ownership is changing. Our the younger generation have less of a hunger for owning stuff. It's a very transitory and transitional kind of a culture, so we don't really feel a sense of attachment to things. That idea of, say, for example, a Patek Philippe being passed down the generation, that's not necessarily, it doesn't mean as much to our generation. And when I talk about our generation, I'm talking about, I'm an older millennial, so it's even more so with younger millennials and Gen Z. So the concept of ownership is changing. The concept of attachment is changing. We live in a society now where you would change your phone or your Apple Watch every year, even if there's nothing wrong with it. I essentially have the kind of contract with my phone provider where it allows me to change it. So I just hand in my phone and get a new one every year, so that I have the latest one. Um, that itself, I always explain that at every point of change, there is a possibility that that customer will drop out, and they will be attracted to a different brand, a different, maybe a different brand with different values, so people's values are changing, and it must change for our planet to survive, because with everything that's happening right now, the environment is a big issue. So I think one of the problems that a lot of these luxury brands are having is that they're focusing too much on their heritage, and they are banking too much on that, and thinking that the clientele that they have now will be around forever, and they're kind of missing the boat. So I don't know what your experience has been.
Because that's exactly the same thing in yachting, and they're very slow in catching up. They are now a little bit eventually getting there, but in comparison with other luxury brands or industries rather that are out there, yachting has a long way to go, and it's all about experiential now with other luxury industries. For example, the other day I was invited to a top jewelry maison in Monaco, and they had partnered up with Tesla, and that was amazing. I mean, who would have thought that diamonds and jewelry would be associated with Tesla, But that's the thing. They want to bring people in to experience something else and then go out there and talk about the brand itself. So what's your knowledge about what these luxury brands are slowly and surely doing?
So from the ones that I see, I don't necessarily think they're doing much. I don't feel like, for example, I had a meeting with a yacht company last year. It was, and they were saying that they were spending about 1 million euros per year on brochures. Like, I don't even, if somebody hands me one, I say, can you please just send me a PDF? It's like to think about the fact that people are actually giving you, I don't want to be carrying it. It's bad for the environment. Don't give me the, the glossy kind of, the brochures. And that's 1 million euros that could go into content, meaningful content that could really help connect and start a dialogue. So from my observation, most luxury brands are still having a monologue. It's kind of like, it's just you see, I always explain that marketing is no longer a broadcast, it's now a dialogue, and if you can't create that dialogue, then you're not on the right track. So this is something that I think I don't see people do much. This concept of you need to have a dialogue. See, when I talk to them about content, their first understanding of content is talking about themselves. Like is about, they think of content as promotional content, and I'm always trying to explain that there's a difference between original content and promotional content. Say, for example, if you were watching Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones is original content, and then the advertising in between it is promotional content. The culture of our generation is now changing in a way that we don't pay attention to the advertising. We want the actual content without the interruption of the content. So your job as a marketer is to not to figure out. So I say that again. So your job as a marketer is no longer just to figure out how to be the advertising between Game of Thrones. It's to figure out how to be the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
To be part of that relationship that's being built, because it's a community thing. I mean, if we're talking about social media, it's very much about connecting with the end person on the other side. So asking them questions and making them feel that they're part of whatever your product or service is. And there's so many brands that don't get it still, and it's frustrating for sure, especially, when are they going to wake up and actually see that?
Well, I think that the simple truth is, so I'll respond to the question about when are they going to wake up. But before I get to that, a good example of what I just said is Amazon. So when you're watching Amazon Prime series, when you're watching that original content, you're being advertised to. You're actually paying Amazon to advertise to you, and that is like the best example of a company that has done it right. Like they've put about 6 to 8 billion a year into their content, and they really know, they really understand this concept of original content that I'm talking about. In terms of when are they going to wake up, I think the reality is that most of them aren't, and they're simply going to go out of business. So if you look at a lot of for example, think about something like Savile Row. Like I can promise you probably that in the next 10-15 years, maximum 20 years, it won't exist. It just won't be there. So, and I have worked with these brands very closely, and I have tried to explain this. And what I'm discovering is that it almost doesn't matter to them, to a lot of these companies, because they're only looking at their short-term gain and their current life. So if they are owners, I think they already know that there's not going to be another generation. And if they are say heads of marketing or CEOs, they're just looking at their bonuses in the next quarter and in the next few years, and then they're going to retire and get out, and there's no real concern for what will happen to that brand.
Yeah, that's very selfish also as a philosophy, and that kind of goes into the way the world sees the environment as well. How the older generation, they're like, oh well, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to be there anyhow, right?
So yeah, and I've had people very close to me that have said those exact words, and I'm like, but you have children. At least I don't have children, and I'm more concerned, but you have children. How about your children? How about their children? And I guess with regards to the brand, I don't know if you could say, it is selfish, but at the same time, it's kind of like there is no sense of ownership in a lot of these brands. And there are companies, for example, say Selfridges, that is privately owned, or for example Steinway, privately owned. But again, for example, Steinway is not necessarily owned by the people who like the Steinway family sold it right now. But still, because it's privately owned, sometimes there's more that sense of attachment and care. But there are some of these brands that there's less of that kind of sense of ownership towards the brand. So there isn't really anybody to take care of it. Say, that brand means something. We need to keep it alive. That's why, for example, companies like House of Fraser, Debenhams, they're huge, companies that are, not really, nobody has really taken that sense of heritage and saying like, I want to save it. So if you are a yacht owner, or you know, like yacht kind of company, owner of a yacht company, you know, and listening to this, I guess it's just, you have to be very honest with yourself and ask that question of, do I really care about the brand? And if you do, you know, if you're building a legacy brand, you know, there's a difference between a heritage brand and a legacy brand, in my opinion. You know, a heritage brand is just a brand that has a long heritage. A legacy brand is a brand that wants to leave a positive legacy, you know, if it's impact driven, right? So if you want to build a brand that has legacy, that has positive impact, then you want to really be embracing this new way of thinking, and then this new audience. But if you're only thinking about your next, you know, few years of bonuses, and then selling it and packing it, and then fair enough, you know, I just be honest about it.
They might be knocking on your door though after a few years' time. So that's what we hope. Because Smart Cookie Media is your company that does all this amazing filmmaking and content and advice, and sort of helping these brands to get them through this this exciting time, I would say. So
Yeah.
if we're looking at yachting companies, we see a lot of the yachts and really like ladies in their bikinis walking around, and okay, that's nice, but is that really what happens when owners, users are on board, especially the new generation? No, they want to go on adventure. They want to utilize the toys and just go wild, have fun, and get their friends on board, and not in the ostentatious way that back in the 70s, 60s maybe was yachting, but now really just enjoying what's out there and being very conscious about the environment and giving back. So there's a lot of companies now that offer adventure travel using super yachts that are, well, built in a certain way that they can collect data and send that off to laboratories so that, you know, something good can come out of it. So this is interesting. And how would you capture that then? I mean, just a little bit of a glimpse maybe.
So the first thing I would say is you need to understand that the values of our generation is changing, and especially even the younger generation, you know, the values are changing. So that culture of the show off and the you know, trying to impress people, you know, trying to find your identity through those moments, those, you know, images that you just described, you know, that has changed. You know, the younger generation are more interested in being on their devices, you know, and being involved and maybe I'm trying to find the word, experience, right? So they're more interested in experiences than owning things. So experience versus ownership is one of the things that I talk a lot about. So the truth is that those industries need to change. So we need to look at a new way of, say, for example, something like WeWork or Uber. You know, these are very good examples of how a disruptive mindset, you know, Airbnb, you know, how a disruptive mindset has come in and provided something that the younger generation want, you know, because they want a convenience and they want experiences. And one of the things to bear in mind is that in general, the younger, well, the millennial generation is the poorest generation since World War II. So after World War, every generation has gotten better off financially until it got to us, and then there was the credit crunch, and you know, so our generation has less of a chance of, unless they inherit money, it has less of a chance of um, being able to have those experiences, you know, to generate enough money to be able to do those things. So it's really either you're left with a group of people who are inheriting that, but even the ones that are inheriting, they don't necessarily have the same values of their parents and grandparents. So it's really about understanding what this new generation wants. If you can provide to them a way of experiencing things, you know, and they want convenience, they want speed, you know, and they want a transitional lifestyle. They don't want to be attached to something. They don't necessarily want to have to look after, say, uh, a huge, the running of like a huge yacht or whatever. But they want more of an Uber lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I can just come in and enjoy it and then move on. And so the idea of the subscription model and the something as a service, like car as a service, home as a service, office as a service, software as a service. So that idea of the product as a service, that is a good business model for any entrepreneurs thinking about how to disrupt maybe the yachting industry, because that's what our generation wants. And I know it's not something that a lot of old school owners would want to hear, but the truth is that that's how our generation behaves, and that's what we want.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, thank you. So, where are we going to see you next, Somi? Because you're also a very talented speaker. You travel the world, and you've been around and seen a lot of things. Will we see you this end of the neck of the woods soon? Maybe in the south?
I hope so. It's just, there's so much going on right now because I've got my book coming out in July, and it will be ready for pre-order in February. I still can't say its name, until my publisher gives me the go-ahead. But it is about the future of work and the impact of technology on the future of work. If people want to see my documentary, best place to go is smartcookiemedia.com/doc, or follow me on LinkedIn, or Instagram, Twitter, all of those things. I'm most active on LinkedIn, but I do post on other social media as well. Facebook is the one I don't use much, but Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn would be good, and sometimes YouTube I post. And yeah, so I hope to see you again. But this is at the moment all the stuff that I've got going on.
No worries. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And your insights have been very interesting. I'm sure you'll get a couple of comments and some emails coming through your way, as we're all into what you're doing. So
thank you. So, and I'm sorry that I don't have better news for the luxury industry. But the truth is, I'm not here to make people feel good. I'm here to make people realize what's good for their business
and offer the solutions for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
Exactly.
All right, Somi, thank you so much again. And this has been an episode Luxury with Natalia. Thanks for tuning in. More episodes coming very soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.